What's up guys, Doug Polk here, and I found a particularly delicious live at the bike hand. Let's go ahead and jump into the action.
There's actually a large contingent of people that are like very committed to
waste 5
Garrett.
Yep.
So
You said Garrett?
Garrett.
Oh yeah.
Raise 17.
You cover me, right? Yeah. 40?
Yeah.
Yeah,
At
I
least
got it.
50 something.
So Dan 3-bets ace queen from the big blind, and Aaron makes the call with pocket nines.
Our hand begins at 100, 200, a little over 200 big blinds effective. So this is some reasonably high stakes poker. Aaron looks down the button at pocket nines, definitely a hand you want to open, and he does make it 500 bucks. The small blind hides a couple of small cards behind the rest of the mucked cards, and now over to the big blind with ace queen. Dan Zack has two options here. He can either decide to call or he can put in a re-raise. Obviously, re-raise is the preferred action with ace queen. You have a very strong hand, you're way ahead of the open range, and frankly, even if you get a fold, that's totally fine with ace queen. So I like a raise, and Dan Zack decides to go for it. Dan decides to go for a size of 1700, maybe a little smaller than I'd like to see, but now the action's back over to Aaron with his pocket nines. Now, even at this stack depth, you know, maybe once in a blue moon, you mix it up and you throw a 4-bet in there, particularly against a small blind 3-bet where their range is a little more merged together. But I think that almost always you want to just be calling here with pocket nines. You're in position, you're extremely deep. Flopping a set here is going to be extremely profitable, so you have to just call and take a flop. Aaron agrees, and let's take a flop. But before we take a flop, I think I forgot to mention that the Upswing Poker Black Friday sale starts November 22nd through November 26th, 25% off every course on the site. If you're looking to improve your poker game, this could be the best chance to do so. So give thanks by thanking me for giving thanks. Just go to Upswing.
And look at this, middle set for Aaron, top pair for Dan.
$1,000.
Could definitely go both ways here. You could call, get Dan to keep going with his bluffs.
Very interesting board texture here. This is a board where the button should have a good amount of very strong hands. The big blind might not be 3-betting. Hands like pocket sixes are probably mainly going to call. Some hands like ace 9, ace 6 are more likely going to call pre-flop than open. Although maybe the suited varieties might get in there for a 3-bet every now and then. They're probably mainly looking to call. An ace-high board like ace-jack 9, for example, is a board where the big blind will have way more strong hands. An even more extreme example of this is on a board like ace-6 deuce. It's going to be a little bit more favorable for the button in terms of how many of the strongest portion of their range that they have. Anyway, and these are things to be thinking about when you're deep. Anyway, back to the hand. So ace-queen flops top pair, second kicker. Pocket nines flops a set. It's pretty good. In Dan's shoes here with top pair, you got to go ahead and bet. You got plenty of other hands you could look to check. If you want to work some top pairs in his checks, you might want to use a weak ace, maybe a middling ace. Ace queen, got to bet for value, which Dan decides to do. Now over to Aaron. This is where things get a little interesting. He can either raise or he can call. Typically in this situation, I lean more towards a raise. The reason the nines is a particularly nice raise is because you don't block a bunch of the value bets that'll call your raise. If Dan does have a hand like ace queen, he's not folding to your flop raise. No one's going to bet fold top pair on the flop. So by raising the flop, you give yourself a chance to win all 200 big blinds. But I don't mind mixing in a call every now and then. You are in position, and this way, especially if you think your opponent's on the bluffy side, you can keep their range a little bit wider. So as long as you know to mainly raise, I'm okay with Aaron calling here, which he does decide to do, and let's take a turn.
His aces. Great looking board for Aaron's pocket nines.
Check.
And now Aaron's got to start building the pot.
Thanks, man.
There's a lot of draws on this board.
He's coming back later.
Yeah, he went somewhere. He's coming back later.
28.
2,800 from Aaron. Exactly half pot.
Yeah. 17.
And a call from Dan.
The turn comes an offsuit jack. Not too crazy of a card here, but it does create a little more possibilities for both players. Now, if Dan Zack did 3-bet a hand like Queen 10 suited, he's picked up an open ender, or King Queen, he's got a gutter, or King 10, he's got a gutter. So he's got plenty of other hands he might want to continue to choose to barrel with. Also on the button, if Aaron had a hand like Ace Jack, he's improved to 2 pair, so not too crazy of a card, but certainly some things developing. We should also take note the flop bet was very small, just $1,000 into roughly 3,600, so a little over a 1/4 pot bet. That means both players should have very wide ranges when they get here on the turn. Now Dan decides to go ahead and check. I don't mind this play either. I'm not really. Frankly, I like a mixed strategy here. I like a little bit of betting and a little bit of checking. The reason that I still like to bet is I think there's a lot of value you can get from the button. Relatively small 3-bet size, very small flop bet. He's going to have a lot of pairs and draws and weaker aces that all have to call you, and that makes me lean towards a bet. But, and this is something you have to do, especially as you get deeper in poker, by checking, he does put some pretty strong hands into that check range, and if he bets and get raised, well, he's in a tough spot. So I don't hate a check, but I think I lean a little more towards betting. After Dan's check, the action's over to Aaron. Here I like a mixed strategy. I like some betting and some more betting. Just bet this hand, do not check. I know I like to talk about mixed strategies a lot. Here, you don't want to do it. You just got to bet and get value. Don't be checking back really strong hands in position when you can win some stacks. Now you got to turn up the heat. Now, as far as what size he goes here, I don't mind a couple different approaches. I don't mind a more middling bet size, so you could bet with some top pairs, and then if your opponent wants to get crazy and check raise you, you protect yourself a little bit. I also don't mind going for a very big size, allowing yourself some room to jam on the river. They both make some sense to me. What I don't like from Aaron here is a relatively small bet size. I just don't think it really would accomplish that much. Anyway, Aaron does decide to go ahead and bet about half pot, which seems totally fine, and now the action's over to Dan Zack. Nothing makes sense here in his shoes other than call. It's about half pot. Raising is too loose. Folding would be insanely nitty. So Dan does decide to call, and let's take a river.
River's a king.
Check.
Dan checks, and Aaron's definitely going to go for value. It's a good looking board to bet with pocket nines. Lots of 2-pair combos that Dan could have.
That's 7,400.
7,400 is the bet from Aaron.
Aaron, how many 5Ks do you have?
25.
And could Dan Zack be thinking about turning his top pair into a bluff here?
All in.
On it.
And he does. Dan Zack shoves all in as a bluff with top pair, turns ace-queen into a bluff, and Aaron is in a crazy spot with pocket nines.
All right, so a lot to take in here. Aaron decides to go ahead and bet 7,400. Seems like a fairly reasonable size. And Dan Zack decides to move in with his top pair, blocking Queen 10 of hearts, which is the only combo of the nuts that Aaron can reasonably have. And really also maybe blocking a trapped aces, but that's really not really the hand he's worried about. He blocks the only combo of the nuts the button can reasonably have, and maybe some two pairs. Aaron's bet's obviously good. What do I think about Dan Zack's play? I think it makes a lot of sense. If we think about what hands are we worried about in Dan Zack's shoes, we're worried about him having Queen 10 of hearts for the nuts, right? Or maybe even Queen 10 with the Queen of hearts that floated that small flop bet and rivered the nuts. Well, he's never going to have any of those hands because you, in fact, have the Queen of hearts. So that's a really nice card to have here. How do I feel about having an ace? I think it's okay. We probably want to block him from having a hand like ace-jack or ace-9 suited. But the only thing that makes me like this a little less is I do think that this is a fairly reasonable call hand. But you could maybe make an argument that it's not as good of a call hand because with the Queen of Hearts, you also block a lot of the missed flush draws. So I have to say, overall, I think I like this play from Dan Zack. My only thing I would say is, don't do this play too much. If you want to throw it in every now and then, that's pretty cool, particularly when you have these kinds of stacks. Dan could reasonably have maybe Queen 10 of hearts, maybe a hand like pocket kings, which is probably what he's most likely representing here, maybe a sort of funky played aces. So there's a few value bets he can have, but it doesn't take many bluff combos to where you're going too far. So I like the play, but don't do it too much. Back over to Aaron. Pocket nines. You flopped your set. This is it, man. You got him. You got him in the net. All you got to do is just put the net on him. That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do.
Dan has an ace in his hand. He can rep aces. The way he played it, he can rep kings. Bet small flop. Check call turn. Check shove river. He can definitely tell the story that he has kings. He can rep Queen 10 here when he check calls the turn, especially a hand like Queen 10 of hearts. He has a Queen of hearts in his hand. He blocks straights. It's a very creative bluff by Dan Zack, and that's why he is one of the best high-stakes players out there in the high-stakes poker scene. And what is Aaron going to do? He is in a brutal spot against Dan. It's really hard for him to have a better hand than pocket nines here. And that's the problem.
This is going to take some time.
I think that Dan thinks that most of Aaron's hands here are two pair combos, ace-jack, ace-king. A lot of aces ups.
Don't think you do this with ace-king ever. This is
Dan probably knows that pocket nines is possibly the best hand Aaron could even have in this spot. And Aaron makes the fold. And Dan's going to show it. What a bluff by Dan Zack. What a hand.
Now, there's some pretty in-depth analysis that we could go through, but I'm not going to. Don't fold sets. It's not that hard. In fact, people already knew I was going to say this. Look at the top comment. All right, Jimmy L. You know me too well. Thanks for joining me here today, everybody. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. And I hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow. Except for the Europeans, because I don't think they do that. So you guys just have like a good Thursday. I'll see you tomorrow.